Welcome, everybody. It's a pleasure to be with you. I'm Rabbi Susan Abramson. I'm the rabbi here, and I can't tell you how happy I am to have all of our friends here and my confirmation class, and to just have this joyful learning event together. And I'm really honored to have my colleagues here, Pastor Jamie and Reverend Emelia, from the churches in Reading, and they'll tell you more about themselves. But I just wanted to welcome all of you and just say that this is really exciting for us to have this opportunity to learn together and to eat together. And I hope that you guys use the opportunity to get to know each other a little bit. So with that, I will, just the order of things, am I telling the order? Okay, it's after all, it's a semi-Seder, which means order, which is how we do our Passover Seder. So we're going to, each of my colleagues here is going to talk a little bit, and then I'm going to have my confirmation class come up, and they're going to tell you about different aspects of the Seder plate, which is in the middle of your table, and we're going to eat the Seder foods. And then after that, we're going to do the blessing, the usual blessing we say over the food, and then we're going to go up and enjoy this delicious potluck meal. And during the meal, we're going to talk more about Passover and Easter and Holy Week. So with that, Pastor Jamie.
Thanks, y'all, and thank you so much, Rabbi Susan, for and all of you for hosting us tonight. It's such a gift for our communities to be together and in joyful times. It's really good to just when there's nothing wrong for us all to gather and to learn and to share with one another. So our communities are, Pastor Emelia and I do a lot of work together, and our communities are excited to share with you, and we're excited to learn too. And we're here tonight not to enact one another's rituals and not to pretend that we own one another's traditions, but to share from our own experience so that we might understand each other better and that we might become better ambassadors for peace and understanding outside of our communities.
Thanks, everyone. I think everything has been said well, and I don't know if we'll just invite the confirmands to come up, right?
What do you suggest for them to talk about? Like what your own traditions are at home.
Okay. So in a bit, after the blessing, and then once you can go up and get food, while you're eating, here is your assignment. We'll remind you then, because hopefully you'll remember. It's pretty easy to remember. Talk about the different traditions that you have in your home surrounding the holiday that you celebrate. Share from your own personal experiences, right? Whatever particular traditions. Maybe you have a particular family tradition for your Seder. Maybe you have a favorite recipe you like to share at a family Easter dinner, or you go to a particular service that you just love. Share from your experience, right? And focus on those traditions and sharing of rituals and things like that. Let's bring up the confirmands.
So I don't know who you guys can just all come up at the same time, I guess, and each of you can just come up to the microphone and talk about the aspect of the Passover Seder plate that you prepared. And so everybody, as we said, there's a Seder plate in the middle of every table, and so I hope everybody can kind of see it and be able to refer to it. And I love in this day and age how everybody immediately grabs their phones to try to find what they wrote out. So come on up. Oh, and I also wanted to introduce our Rabbinic Intern Ben Einsidler, who's our confirmation teacher this year, who is going to integrate everything they're going to say.
Hello, everyone. Good evening.
Good evening.
So the Seder plates in front of you are symbolic of many things, and before we talk about what is traditionally on the Seder plate, there are many different variations of the Seder plate in many Jewish communities around the world and in many other communities in the United States. But what we have here is the stock Seder plate that most people are working with next week. So our confirmation class is going to tell us what each of these items are, and then I will give a little wrap up. So without further ado.
My name is Hayden, and I'm going to say what matzah is and why it is important, and like why is it on the Seder plate. Matzah represents the unleavened bread the Jews brought out of Egypt with them. The bread is unleavened, or when bread is unleavened, it means that the dough did not have time to rise, and this was because the Jews left Egypt in a hurry, and they didn't have time for their bread or their dough to rise.
Got some requests.
Try to do it again.
Yeah, a little bit of some of it again. Yeah.
All right, matzah represents.
Is that better for everyone?
All right, matzah represents the unleavened bread that the Jews took out of Egypt or brought out of Egypt with them. When bread is unleavened, it means that the dough did not have enough time to rise, and this was because the Jews left Egypt in a hurry.
Hi. My name is Luke, and I will be talking about the parsley and how that's important. The parsley represents that the spring and how like green everything is when the flowers like start to bloom and stuff. And we dip the parsley in salt water to represent like, so we can like try to feel what the Jews felt when they were like being mistreated in Egypt, so we can feel like their tears. And yeah.
Great job.
My name's Olivia, and I have the egg. The egg represents new life in spring and the cycle of the year, and is also traditionally eaten over Passover by many communities.
Hi, my name's Sophie. I'm representing the Haroset. On the Seder plate, it represents the material used by the slaves in Egypt to build buildings and houses. It reminds us of the hardships we went through to become free. There are many different ways to make it, but the key ingredients that many people use are chopped apples, nuts, and wine or grape juice.
I'm Eden, and I have the maror. So the maror, also known as bitter herbs, represents the bitterness we experienced as slaves in Egypt, and today you can often see horseradish on the Seder plate to show this.
Thank you so much. A quick note, as we read the Haggadah, or the Haggadah, which is the book that we use at the Seder to go through all the steps of the Seder, the way that you actually perform the Seder and fulfill your Passover obligation is by identifying what these things are and physically pointing at them and showing everyone at the table what they are. So congratulations, you've all fulfilled your Passover obligation. And the Passover Seder plate also has been appropriated by the African American community, by Jews of color. There are many different variations, as I said. Also, the LGBTQ+ community have many items they put on. And I think it's one of the strengths of Judaism that the Seder plate continues to evolve, and we continue to go out from Egypt in our own time. So enjoy your Seder, and thank you so much for coming tonight.
That was excellent. I'm really proud of you guys. That was wonderful. And so we actually have the elements of the Seder plate, some of them in front of you. By the way, I also wanted to introduce our Cantorial Soloist Ben Silver, and maybe Ben, this might be a good time for you to, since we're in the Seder Passover mood, sing a song for us that we all, the most popular song during our Passover Seder. So, and in the meantime, feel free to break off a piece of matzah that's in the middle of your table, and take some parsley that's in the middle of the table. You can just, usually we say a special blessing over each of these things, but we're not going to tonight. So just break off a piece of matzah so everybody can taste the matzah. You can take the parsley and dip it in the water. Apparently we have no salt in the temple, so it's regular water. We're just imagining. And charoset, the other two elements we have on the table for you are charoset, which is as we said, a combination of this recipe is apples and nuts and wine, and it's supposed to represent the mortar of the bricks that the Israelites put together when they were slaves in Egypt. And usually when you eat the matzah, you put the charoset on top of it, and you also put a little bit of the maror, which is that little dish, the white substance in the little dish, which is the bitter herbs. So usually we put the charoset and the bitter herbs together on the matzah to remember that there's both good and bad in our lives, the bitter as well as the sweet. So while you're doing that, we will sing Dayenu.
Hi everybody, and thank you again for coming here, and this is a lot of fun. It's wonderful to see you all. My name is Ben Silver, and we are going to sing together. You have words with you. One of the more popular Passover songs. It's called Dayenu, and it's kind of a fun song, and it almost sounds like a children's song, but it really appeals to children and adults both, and it has really a lot of tradition. The meaning of Dayenu roughly is a long phrase, it would have been enough. And from the Haggadah, we have liturgy text that says, if God had only done such and such for us, it would have been enough. But God did more, and if he had done that, it would have been enough. And if he had done that, it would have been enough. So we take the song, the way we do the song usually is just to take three of those. If God had just brought us out of Egypt, that would have been enough. If God had just given us the Sabbath, which we call Shabbat, that would have been enough. And if God had only given us the Torah, which of course is so important to us, that would have been enough. So we sing that, and of course we sing it in Hebrew, so you have the transliterations in front of you. And hope you'll be able to go along with that and read the words. The first verse is like, Ilu Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim is the word for Egypt. And the song goes like this. Ilu Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Hotzianu mi Mitzrayim, Dayenu. Dayenu, it's a fun part. Dayenu, Dayenu, clap along, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Natan lanu et hashabat, Natan lanu et hashabat, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Ilu Natan lanu et haTorah, Natan lanu et haTorah, Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. One more time. Dayenu, 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 Dayenu. Big ending. Dayenu, Dayenu. Good job, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. And now we already ate, so I think we'll just skip the blessing for the eating since we're already eating. And we also have grape juice up there. According in our seders, we drink 4 cups of wine, which have lots of different symbolism. So if you want to grab a little grape juice when you're up there, also that'll also be a little bit of the Passover feel. So why don't you go on up and enjoy the delicious potluck, and thank you to everybody who brought something to eat. So we're going to start off by talking a little bit about more about Passover, and then my friends over here are going to talk a little bit about Holy Week and Easter. So Ben, I think you were going to come up and tell us, just give us a very brief overview of the story of Passover, what Passover is the story of, and then I'll take it from there.
It's a pop quiz.
It's considered meritorious and a good thing to expound on the Passover Seder and to have the Seder go until midnight. So everybody strap in, we're going to be here a while. But seriously, Passover recounts the central story of the Jewish people, which is the Exodus. At the end of the book of Genesis, the Israelites go down to Egypt. Joseph dies in Egypt, and the Israelites become enslaved by Pharaoh. And Passover recounts the Israelites' journey from being slaves in Egypt through gaining freedom by the hand of Moses and God. There are other holidays that come later that continue the story, where we get the Ten Commandments, etc. But Passover really celebrates the becoming of the Jewish people into their own, moving from slaves to freedom, moving from being at the beck and call of others to the beck and call of ourselves. So you might know the broad strokes. Moses is placed in the river as a Hebrew baby. He is saved by who we call in Hebrew Bat Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh, who brings him into the palace. Moses eventually grows up, sees an Egyptian slave, an Egyptian taskmaster hitting a Hebrew slave, kills him. There's a whole lot of rabbinic commentary written around that. It's actually very, very sparse in the actual biblical text. But Moses flees to the land of Midian and eventually sees a burning bush, a sneh boer ba'esh in Hebrew, a bush that's burning in fire. He receives the call of God to go back to Egypt and bring the Israelites out of Egypt, out of bondage to freedom. And then there are the 10 plagues brought by God, written through the hand of Moses. There are blood, frogs, lice, wild beasts, cattle disease. What's next? Pop quiz. Darkness is number 9. There are boils, hail, locusts, darkness, 3 days of it, and finally the death of the firstborn, after which Pharaoh says, enough, go. And the name Passover actually comes from the 10th plague. The word Pesach in Hebrew means to pass over, because the 10th plague was the death of the firstborn. And the Israelites are commanded at the start of Exodus chapter 12 to slaughter the Passover sacrifice, take its blood, put it on the doorposts and the lintels of their homes, so that the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, will pass over their homes and the Israelites will be saved. And that very night, we were summarily kicked out of Egypt and began our long trek to freedom after 430 years. So in each generation, and I'll end with this, in each generation and each year, we are commanded in the Haggadah. The Hebrew is the Kol Dor Vador Chayav Adam Lirot Etzmo Ke'ilu Hu Chaya Yatsa Mitzrayim. In each and every generation, a person is obligated to see themselves as if they personally went out of Egypt. So the time of Passover is a time of personal examination, where we think to ourselves, what are our Egypts? What are we still slaves to? How is this story evergreen and ever present for us in the central narrative of the Jewish people? And Passover kicks off a period of this self-examination leading up to another holiday in the spring of Shavuot, where we celebrate the 10 Commandments and their reception at Sinai. But Passover is also the kickoff of the spring, which we're starting to enjoy here. So that is your Passover lesson.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. You just took everything I was going to say and more. That's totally fine. So I just wanted to emphasize the fact, and this is where we might have parallels in our holidays, that when we experience the Passover Seder, we're supposed to personally feel as if we went from slavery to freedom. And so we go through the ritual as we go through the Haggadah, which is the book that we use, of slavery to freedom, and we're each supposed to feel as if we've experienced that personally, but it's so much more elaborate than that. When in actuality, and I hope the Jews at the table have been able to share with their Jewish, non-Jewish friends like what some of the traditions are that your family does, and maybe a lot of you have also, who aren't Jewish, have also been to a Passover. If you've been to a Passover Seder, raise your hand. Okay, so there are a bunch of people who haven't been, so that's great. So there's so many traditions from the 4 cups of wine to the matzah, to all the blessings, the Seder plate that the kids talked about, to the kids. We make it fun for the kids during the Seder, so we involve them as much as possible. We sing the 4 questions. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh, and all the kids stand up and ask 4 questions. Why is this night different from all other nights? And then we, in the middle of the Seder, kids, what do the kids do that's special that you enjoyed probably the most of anything? What do you find? You find the afikomen, which is a Greek word meaning dessert. So what we do is we take a piece. We start off with 3 full sheets of matzah, and then we break the middle matzah and hide half of it, which becomes the afikomen, which symbolizes the fact that our world is not complete, that we still have a long way to go, that we're separated from ourselves in many ways. So we put it in a special bag and we hide it somewhere. And during while everybody is eating during the middle of the Seder, the kids go up and try to find the afikomen, and they're supposed to get a prize, whoever finds the afikomen. So guys, what are some prizes you've gotten from finding the afikomen?
A $10 bill.
Whoa. Anybody else? Or you don't get one? We have a lot of deprived children, their parents. Jacob?
$5 gift card.
A $5 gift card? Okay, Ben got his more generous parents than you do. Anybody else get anything? Luke?
$50.
$50, wow. All right, we're coming to your house this year.
I found it.
So the kids tend to be really sneaky about it. I know when we had big Seders at my house, I would try to hide I would try to distract the kids, and then I would go hide the afikomen. But one of my nephews took his cell phone and kind of like followed me around the house just to see where I had hidden it. So we try to make it fun, because this is probably the most important Jewish family holiday, where we sit around the table and reenact an entire one of the most important aspects of our Jewish tradition, which is also the freedom from slavery and the revelation of God. And the other big thing is, who do we welcome towards the end of the Seder, who's not there with us the rest of the time?
Oh, yeah.
Comes to the door.
Don't get me.
The angel. Someone that we like let in.
Right, we let somebody in. We open the door for. Everybody's still stuck on Purim. We open the door for Elijah the prophet, who comes to the door, and again we have all the kids go to the door, and we have Elijah's cup. We have a special cup on the table for Elijah, so all the kids go to the door, and the idea is that Elijah's spirit is supposed to come as a symbol of redemption and hope, and so usually, like at our Seders, this doesn't happen at any of your Seders, but in my house, somebody drinks the wine, and so the kids come back and they look in the cup, and suddenly all the wine is gone. And you see, Elijah came. My nephew also videotaped this. and one year we had the police chief at my house for the Seder, and so we made him chug a full cup of Manischewitz wine, and we were so happy about that. That was my favorite Passover memory I will never forget. So those are some of the traditions around the Passover Seder, and Seder means order, and we're supposed to do everything in a very, very specific way to fulfill the tradition. So with that, I think I'll stop there and invite my friends to come on up and talk about Holy Week and Easter.
So Holy Week is the phrase that we give to a series of days that is really recognizing the stories that happened during the last week of Jesus' life. So it begins first with Palm Sunday. You'll learn a little bit more about that in a bit, and the palms, and that marks the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, because they are all traveling as pilgrims to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. Later in the week, we celebrate Holy Thursday or Maundy Thursday, and that marks traditionally the story where it was the last night that Jesus was together with his friends, and they shared a special meal together. You can think of Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper. And then we have Good Friday, and that you might say, what's so good about it? Good Friday is the day that Jesus was arrested, tried, and executed by the state of Rome. It's very somber and sad. There's Holy Saturday, where some Christians will mark a vigil and sort of keep watch. And then Easter Sunday is when we celebrate the resurrection of Jesus, when the women go to the tomb to take care of the body, because it was over the Sabbath. They couldn't go to the tomb to take care of the body. So they go and they're shocked to find that he is not there. And so that is the whole course of Holy Week. And we'll have a couple more introductions to that in our rituals and our symbols that are at the tables here. But before we do that, I'd like to invite Jamie to come up and talk a little bit more about what does that mean to us as we practice that celebration of these stories.
So you've heard earlier that so the egg on the Seder plate symbolizes new life. There's a lot of talk about new life in the story for us of Easter, right? And so in my church, a couple of years before I got there, Pastor Carol, our associate pastor, had ordered a symbol of new life for our children. She had ordered butterflies that were going to be released on Easter. And this was so exciting. And it was going to be this big surprise. And on Easter Sunday morning, they opened up the box of butterflies, and all but one had died. So Pastor Carol thought quickly on her feet and came up with a metaphor, for why it was okay. Here was this one butterfly who escaped and was free. And I'm just really glad to know that it's not just us who have traditions that involve lying to and fooling children as a part of our ritual, right? The Seder plate for me it's so tactile and so sensory, and I love that that part of remembering the story is tasting it, right? There are very few food items that are mandatory or traditional for Easter. So one of them is communion, this meal that Jesus instituted with his friends, right? Which is always some kind of bread and some kind of juice or wine. And then one of them is hot cross buns. So this, you know the song, right? Hot cross buns. Everybody, I think in the whole world has played it on a recorder at least once. The hot cross buns were initially meant to symbolize something rich and beautiful, but then they were spiced with things that would remind you of burial spices. So they were spiced with cinnamon and nutmeg and clove, those kind of warming spices that would remind you of burial spices. So it was intended to give you a literal taste of what Holy Week is about, right? The depth of sorrow when you're sitting with people who are grieving, you're sitting with the person who you thought was going to be, who was going to be your champion, right? Because the call for a Messiah, the people were expecting a victor, a soldier, somebody who was going to come and destroy the occupying force, right? And it turns out that Jesus was none of that, right? He represented peace, right? And he refused to lift up a sword even against those who came against him, who came to arrest him and try him and kill him. And so these roles were meant to symbolize being in that depth, like these spices that remind you of death, but then also eating something that's rich and joyful, right? And that's for us is what the difference is in Holy Week into Easter, right? If you've ever been to the services, they're super dramatic. The one on, some people celebrate it on Holy Thursday and some on Good Friday. There's one called a Tenebrae, in which we take all of the lights out of the church one by one, and then when the whole sanctuary is dark, we slam the Bible shut and we take it out so that the whole sanctuary, the whole chapel, becomes like a tomb. And that's the place where Easter Vigil happens, where we sit in that darkness. And it's meant, just like tasting the salt water, right? It's meant to bring you back to that time so that you imagine that you were there. Because the whole point of this holiday is to remember that even in our darkest depths, even in our saddest moments, that there's possibility for transformation. Because we wake up on Easter morning and the tomb is empty, and we found that God had raised Jesus from the dead. And that reminds us every year that no matter where we are, it is always possible for God to transform something, to renew something, to bring new life and resurrection into our lives. So that's, I think there are good parallels in our traditions for that. I know you guys were sharing your stories of your own faith and food traditions around these holidays. I did not grow up in a religious household, so by the time I really started celebrating these holidays, I was like pastoring a church, or I was part of. I had a lot of work to do during Holy Week, so we were exhausted by the end of Sunday, and so we made it our ritual. We had all forgotten to throw away our Christmas wreaths, and so we made it our ritual on Easter Sunday to burn our Christmas wreaths in a bonfire, and then to roast marshmallow peeps over it. And that's our faith and food tradition among my clergy cohort. Pastor Emelia, do you want to help people?
So the whole point of tonight is to build relationship with each other and share about our traditions so that we can better know our neighbors, because in just a short amount of time, we are all going to be celebrating one of these holidays. And so as we are celebrating these holidays, we will know what our neighbor of another faith, another congregation, has some idea what they will be doing. You can imagine the person sitting next to you or across from you is at their family Seder, or maybe attending that Tenebrae service when all the lights are going out, right? And just so that we can know better each other. Part of that means knowing what is sort of symbol or tactile or ritual. And so we learned about the Seder plate, and that's sort of a visual representation. We can imagine it, right? So to give you an idea of some of the different symbols and rituals of Holy Week, there are 3 tables, or 3 items at each of the tables. And I'm gonna invite the palm group to come up if there's a volunteer to read about what the palms are and what they symbolize.
I think by acclamation it's me. Are there palms on each table, or is this the one palm?
Just yours.
Okay. All right.
The lone palm.
The lone palm. The first day of Holy Week is Palm Sunday. This is the Sunday before Easter Sunday, during which we read the story about Jesus entering into the city of Jerusalem. In the scripture, it says that he rides into the city on a donkey. Some scholars suggest that it is likely on the other side of the city. The Roman governor, Pilate, rode into the city on a war horse in a demonstration of Roman force to remind Jewish pilgrims gathering for Passover that Judea was under Roman rule. The story tells us that the people greeted Jesus waving palm trees or laying their coats down in the road in front of him. Palms are handed out on Palm Sunday as a way for Christians to reenact and engage with the scripture. Fun fact really quick, 2 months ago I was in Jerusalem, and you can see people actually, there are signs of all the stations of the cross, and one of them is where Jesus entered the old city, which is actually very cool to see.
Yeah. Thank you, Ben.
Great. So our next day is Maundy Thursday, and I'm going to invite the bowl and the basin and towel table, whoever the reader is there.
Glad we don't have to wash feet.
Everybody hates this.
Towel and basin. On Thursday of Holy Week, sometimes called Holy Thursday or Maundy Thursday, Christians often attend an evening worship service to reflect on the story of the Last Supper. During this evening, Christians often read the scripture where Jesus takes the water and towel, which a servant would use, and begins to wash the feet of his disciples. Normally in Jewish homes at this time, a servant would be the one to wash the dust and dirt off guests' feet. Instead, Jesus performs this act of service, humility, and love for his closest friends and followers. We call this Maundy Thursday because Maundy is derived from the Latin word for mandate. After washing his disciples' feet, Jesus tells them to do the same for others in a mandate to love one's neighbors.
Some churches are so bold to have foot washing services, which you can imagine is maybe not the most popular type of service.
I've done it already, however.
Yes.
I was once asked to do this at a Catholic church.
Yeah, it happens.
We're going to do the eating one this year, so you don't have to be worried that anybody's going to try to wash your feet.
Our last table is the chalice and paten.
Whoops. So I have what's called the chalice and the paten, which is a word for plate, I guess. I don't know. It's not a word we use in Maryland growing up. So anyway, on Maundy Thursday, the worship service includes communion, which is another way to remember the story of the Last Supper. Jesus took bread on the plate and a cup of wine and offered them to his disciples to eat the bread and drink the wine in remembrance of him. The bread symbolizes his body that was broken for them, and the blood and the wine symbolizes his blood, which would be poured out for them, which is what happened, of course, in the crucifixion. So it's sort of giving you a hint of what's to come. The disciples didn't really understand this at the time. So we use the chalice and the paten to serve the bread and wine, which is often grape juice. Episcopalians in the old days anyway used to use pretty sweet wine, but I didn't grow up as one, I only married one. But so communion is something that Christians do regularly. Many churches will serve communion every week or once a month, but it's done specifically on Maundy Thursday as part of this special story.
The last thing we'll say about Holy Week is that the symbol for Good Friday and Holy Saturday and even Easter Sunday is the cross. And so on Friday, we see Jesus crucified, and Ben made reference to the Stations of the Cross, which is a practice in which Christians walk through what happened to Jesus on that day, stopping at each point where Scripture tells us that Jesus stopped to pray a specific kind of prayer about what happened to him when he fell, when somebody greeted him, when they put a crown of thorns on his head, for example. The cross is not something that we want to bring into this worship space because the cross has been weaponized, has been used to by oppressive forces to oppress other people of other religions, especially Jewish folks. And so we know that that's a symbol, that has been a symbol that's been used in violence. And for us, it's a symbol of liberation, right? It's a symbol of how the state wanted to silence somebody who was dangerous, and how even despite that oppressive force, God was working things for good. God was working things for freedom, right? So that symbol for us tells us that we are about the work of freedom, that we are about the work of being liberated by God from all things that would keep us bound, especially the things that would keep us from experiencing the world the way God intended it, creation the way God intended it, and fullness with God. And so for us, the symbol, especially of the empty cross on Easter morning, is a reminder that God is working all things for good, for new, for renewal, and is encouraging us to liberate the world from the things that keep the world from shalom, from wholeness, from being in a state of completeness the way God intends. Anything else?
That's it. Yes, we should do dessert.
So I wanted to thank you guys in particular. I mean, I learned a lot this evening. I knew lots of bits and pieces of this, but I think the two of you just put it all together for me in a way that I finally really understand it. And so I really thank you both so much. And I also, my final impression is that we share so much in common, and just that we share the same values, we share the same, not all the same traditions, of course, but the same essence of what these holidays are about. From slavery to freedom, for both of us on many different levels. And so, and it's also significant that these holidays occur at the same time of year for all of us as well. So I think during the season we can not just appreciate the oneness of being part of one tradition and one community that is experiencing the same rebirth of spring and rebirth of freedom and hope. So thank you so much for teaching me so much this evening, and I hope that everybody had an opportunity to really learn from each other.